What's going on, Creator Factor fam? I am your host who loves you the most, Ozeal, and this is the podcast where creators become entrepreneurs. And today I got an amazing guest in the building who's rewriting the rules of PR for small business owners and content creators as well. She's an award-winning PR strategist. She's the host of a top-rated small business PR podcast, which I highly recommend. She's helped founders of all walks build PR strategies and land organic features in notable media outlets such as the New York Times, Vogue, and even our girl Oprah Winfrey, her favorite things. And she's all about, massive getting PR reach without massive budgets and making media accessible for everybody, right? Even us content creators. So if you ever felt like your message deserves more reach, but you don't know where to start, this is a podcast for you. So Creator Factor fam, let's dig into this and let's welcome to the show Gloria Chou in the building, all the way from New York City. Gloria, how you doing?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm doing so good. I'm so excited to dive in.
NYC in the building. I was a bit as from a Houston Astros fan. I'm not sure if you watch baseball, but I'm not sure if you were following the World Series, but I have a lot of friends in New York, and I've been healing a lot of hearts lately out
Yeah,
from Houston and New York
yeah,
after the Yankees lost the World Series.
yeah,
But
yeah,
hey,
yeah, yeah.
it was a great season. Let's dig into this, Gloria, because I'm really excited about this particular topic specifically. Before we dig into this, I was doing some research and I discovered that you have a background. I mean, you were a former U.S. diplomat. I know you've been asked about that a bit, but let me ask you this specifically about being a U.S. diplomat, mission into the world of PR. How did that background, being a U.S. diplomat, influence the way you approach PR and PR strategies?
It's very untraditional, right? And I think my life has been marked by all of these transitions that are very untraditional. So obviously, when I worked in diplomacy, I grew up in a bicultural, bilingual household. So I was very interested in all things international relations. And that's what I studied in school. And I actually first wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. My mom was like, no, you need to get a real job. So then I was like, okay, well, after doing a couple of years in the film industry where I was a field producer taking crews, to film documentaries around the world, I decided, okay, well, maybe it's time to go back to school. And so to apply for grad school, I applied for a few scholarships and I ended up getting one from the State Department that pre-selected me to be a US diplomat. I didn't really know what that entailed. I just knew that I would be working abroad. And as exciting as it was, we had amazing benefits. We got to work on important issues. I realized I'm not a bureaucrat and I'm more of a creative entrepreneur. And it was
Mm-hmm.
just not a personality fit. And I loved communications. I was doing some speech writing for the ambassador. Naturally, I always say, I'm everyone's unofficial hype woman. I'm like that hip hop MC that gets everyone excited. In my next life, I'm going to be one, I swear. And so, yeah, yeah. And so I applied for, like, I kid you not, 1,000 jobs in PR and communications. And I quickly found out that this was a very gate kept industry. And they only wanted people with very specific, I want to say, cookie cutter PR experience. And I didn't have that. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to hack it from the outside. And I got one tiny startup client who like barely had any budget and they were making some obscure fintech app, which I had no idea what that was. And I was like, okay, well, they would only pay me, by the way, if I got them featured, which like no PR agency would do. So me not having any PR connections and not knowing any journalists, I had to literally Google New York Times newsroom and dial zero to the operator and cold call thousands of times with sweaty hands until I finally cracked the code on what made someone say yes in email and in a phone call that got my client. Eventually I got them on CNBC, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Financial Times, and I started to pick up on patterns. And so now I really call myself someone that's a disruptor in the industry because
Mm-hmm.
no one is doing PR in this way. Traditionally, we're told you need to pay someone who knows someone. Well, for 95% of us who don't have that privilege and access, what are we supposed to do? So to me, it's about giving agency back to us as entrepreneurs that we own our message. And if you just know how to crack the code, which I will share with you, you know how to write a good pitch, you know how to send it out. That's really all PR is. It's just putting that together and repeating it as a system in your business.
All right, so I got a lot of things going through my mind right now. Number one, I love the fact that you got dirty. Like I love the fact that you took on our client, you didn't know anything about the industry, and you got in the trenches, you made cold calls, which is probably the thing that a lot of creatives hate to do, especially creative types, is we don't want to pick up the phone and then go for it and ask, right, and get rejected. And I love the fact that you put yourself in that experimental, again, in the trenches phase and learning how this thing works. Because from the outside looking in, as you know, Gloria, like I look at PR, and as many creatives do, and people that are not in the celebrity realm, is we look at it as like, oh, it's not accessible to us. Like you have to have a book, or you have to have certain credentials to be able to get PR. And I'm sure some of it relates, right? You definitely need some credibility, but it's really interesting to see how there are individuals like you, leaders, helping other small business owners and now creators as well, crack the codes, and for us to be able to make, no, PR is accessible for everybody. You just have to learn how to pitch it correctly and position yourself. And I love that. So anyways, there's a lot of things there. Let's dig into the pitching, because as I mentioned, for a lot of creators, we feel like we need to get connected with the PR people, and we need to have big budgets. Break it down,
No.
because I know you have a framework. What
Yeah.
are the first steps you recommend for us content creators who want to be visible organically in this PR world?
Well, I would say the first thing is to reject the lies that the industry has told us so that they can monetize on us. Obviously, the PR industry gets rich on telling us, well, you have to go through us, or they're not going to cover you unless you know somebody. And that's absolutely not true. The thing that makes the news media work, it's a 24/7 content machine, by the way, is that they depend on fresh new voices. Because think about it. If they only covered the big brands, the big names, they would probably lose their credibility very quickly. They would become the spokespeople for them. So they actually depend on lots of indie voices, emerging voices, and it's our job to put our name in the hat. I always say to my PR students, why not you? Why have it not be me, right? And so here's the thing: journalists want to talk to you, the creator. They don't want to talk to a PR rep. So let's cut the fluff and let's remove that middleman. You can pitch today. You don't need a billion followers. It's not a popularity contest. But here's the thing people don't know is that a lot of times people pitch and they think, well, I need to talk about my features and benefits and kind of my resume. And journalists don't care about that. They just want to know, what is the issue? What is the insight? What is the trend? And it's not about reinventing the wheel. I had someone who was a Pilates teacher get featured on an article titled, What is Pilates in 2023? So it's not about reinventing the wheel, right? It's not about something groundbreaking. It's simply positioning your pitch in a way that's organized and digestible. And so instead of saying, here's how I can help you, I like to have different things like predictions or seasonal trends or TikTok trends or what are people doing. And you want to lead with that instead of who you are and what you're selling. We had a content creator who actually took a contrarian angle. And the angle that I came up for him was how all of these other gurus were teaching you X, Y, and Z methods to grow your account. But he actually found that they were not working for him and what you should do instead. And that actually got him featured 3 different times. So there's lots of different ways you can find your angle. And it's not about you having a crazy story. It's about finding the right entryway. So I talked about predictions. I talked about seasonality. There's a lot of things around Q3 and Q4 and Q1 for new year, new you, whatever that new trend is. Maybe it's a tool. People love to look ahead and make predictions. Another thing is, like I said, the contrarian angle, right? What other people are not talking about. Another thing is leading with a data point. So we have someone who is a content creator and also writer, and she teaches introverts how to rise up in a world full of loud extroverts. She's a speaking coach. And the angle that she went for was that she took a third-party data, like a research, saying that certain introverts are actually better suited for C-level positions than introverts. So you see how that's leading with something different. And I think us as founders, as entrepreneurs, we're not used to writing like this. We're used to selling, right? So it's a different hat that we're wearing. So don't feel overwhelmed if, this is all new to you. You just simply haven't learned it yet. And so the journalists, again, they're looking for not someone that's newsworthy. I don't think there's anything newsworthy about a person or a product. I've written stuff for bath salts and candles and they all get featured. It's just about positioning it in the right way. And so that's where my CPR pitching method comes in. I call it my PR secret sauce. It's from years of cold calling and hacking it and picking up on patterns. And
Love
CPR
it.
stands for credibility, point of view, and relevance. And when your pitch has these 3 things, it could be a verbal pitch or a written pitch, it usually gets a response for the journalist to be like, oh, tell me more. And that's all we're trying to do with pitching. We're not writing the story for them. We just want to give them a possibility of an article or a story and for them to say, okay, well, tell me more. That's really the point of the CPR pitch. And I can give you examples of exactly what that looks like.
Yeah, let's dig into that because I think, Gloria, one of the things that I'm thinking as you were sharing that, by the way, thank you for we're cracking the code here, y'all creators. So this is some good stuff here. Is that often is we don't know what to prepare for. So before we make the pitch, how do we? Because we're wearing so many hats, right? We're brand builders, we're marketers, we're content creators. How can we develop that PR mindset going into that first pitch? Let's dig
So
into that.
so we're not taught to do PR because we're so focused on social media, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
always say there's no more powerful tool than PR because it gets you SEO, those powerful backlinks, which social media doesn't. It also gives you that trust and authority, which ads doesn't either. So simultaneously, you're checking off all of those boxes of searchability, discoverability, and just long-term traffic to you. And as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, we always have to think, how can we work smarter and not harder? How can I leverage my time to build an asset for my business, not just doing busy work? So it takes a different mindset shift to know that you're planting the seeds and you're cultivating relationships with the journalists. But if you do get featured once, that's really powerful backlinks that could take months that for you to blog instead. I'd rather get on a podcast and get featured and then repurpose that into social media instead. So that's kind of a mindset thing.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is like you're not going on live TV most of the time. It's probably a digital article or a podcast. So there's no need to worry about how you're going to present. A lot of it's just done through email, honestly. A lot of times they don't even need an interview unless it's a podcast. A lot of the articles are written just simply by emailing back and forth. So just take the pressure off. Don't feel like you're going to be interrogated in front of a live audience. It's really not. It's really just, it's really low pressure and you're fine. Just come as you are. So let's talk about the CPR method because PR, from what I've learned from cold pitching and hacking it, is and don't let anyone make it more complicated if they're trying to monetize on you. But PR is just writing a good pitch and sending it to the right person. And if you can put the two and two together, you repeat it. So let's talk about writing a good pitch. So the CPR method stands for credibility, point of view, and relevance. And how I like to start my emails is you start with a subject line. That's the most important thing to get it open, right? Don't put your name, your company, the word pitch. The journalist already knows that. What you want to do is write the subject line almost like a title of an article, right? 3
Yeah.
viral Instagram trends that'll be big in 2025. You see how that is specific? It tells them exactly what the pitch is, and it doesn't go into tangents about who you are because they don't know you. It's not about you, it's about what you're pitching. And then you start the email. I like to start with R as in relevance and CPR. Because what is news if it's not relevant? You want to catch their attention immediately in the email. So you want to set the stage for the relevancy. What is the season that we're in? What is the trend that we're in? What is this other TikTok influencer doing? Right. So that is what I talk about, like the 10 different ways you can be relevant, contrarian, using a data point, predictions, seasonality. After you do that, then I like to have 3 bullet points, which is the point of view. So you can say, as people are looking for X, Y, and Z this season, I've found 3 things that worked really well. 1, 2, 3. So that's your point of view. And then you conclude the email with credibility. Don't go crazy here. Just 1 or 2 sentences about your story and a link
Okay.
for them to find out more. And that's it. The energy of the pitch is concise. It's authoritative. It's not begging of desperation of I can't pay for an ad, so please feature me. It's simply, here's what I'm finding. Here's a trend. Here's an insight. Here's what I think. And here's how I can be reached. It's a very confident and kind of smooth way of getting into the journalist inbox without sounding annoying.
Love what you just shared because I'm thinking of like how can I as a creator and for our creators that are watching or listening, the adopting that PR mindset of what are some of the topics that I can discuss. For example, me as a podcast marketer, what can I start thinking about outside of the box that are contrarian, has my own point of view, that establish my credibility, working for a network, working in the space for 10 years. What are some, now you got me thinking of like, what are some of the topics that I could bring out? For example,
so many.
yeah, so many, right? I mean, even thinking about predictions.
Best tools, 10
Come on,
best way. Yeah.
come on.
AI.
Yeah. And the impact on podcasting, et cetera. I love it. I love that. Now you got me thinking, Gloria. See, this is the reason why I got you on the show. And hopefully, you guys are also, you're listening to this and hearing this and just embracing this because as you mentioned, Gloria, you're right. Because a lot of these media companies do want fresh new voices. They don't want the same old stuff.
They depend on it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think there's an opportunity there for creators, again, to share their credibility, their point of view, and then add to the relevant topics that are happening within your industry,
There's
right?
so many more outlets than we know. I think a lot of times we just think of like the Forbes and the business, but there are like literally tens of thousands of high authority like ranking websites that you can get on,
Can you
which
talk
drives.
about those resources? Like anything that comes to mind specifically for content creators?
Well, so we talked about the CPR method in terms of how to pitch, right? Because PR is writing a good pitch and sending it out. So let's talk about sending it out. Who do we send it to?
Let's go.
And there's a couple of ways that you can kind of hack it, if you will. One is installing a Google News alert. So just
Okay.
type in the search bar content, virality, short form video, whatever that is, whatever your industry keyword is, and Google will ping you with all of the articles that are being written about. And the beautiful thing about this is that it does two things. One, it trains your brain to think in terms of the subject line, like what I said, think in terms of how the news story is. So then you start to understand, okay, this is what a story looks like. And then you can copy and paste the name of the person who wrote it into an ever expanding Excel spreadsheet, which becomes your media database of who to contact. Now, in my program, we have a database of over 100,000 journalists, but you can start doing this by yourself and start populating that in a grassroots way. Another thing you can sign up for is Haro, which stands for Help a Reporter Out, which is bought by a different company. But you sign up as a source, and they will ping you with all the hundreds of inquiries that journalists are looking for, a very specific person to interview. And if you fit that category, then you would respond. I had someone using the CPR method getting onto 7 to 10 just using Haro alone this year. So she got featured in Pop Sugar, in Wall Street Journal, just using Haro. There's other things like Quoted, which also is kind of like a platform where journalists are sending their inquiries of, hey, I'm looking for a person to interview that's this and that. And if you fit that, then you would respond. Also on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter or X, there's hashtags like journal request, which you could follow, which are journalists requesting people to be interviewed. Again, it's very specific, so you might not fit all the categories, but you can have a look out for that. Another thing that's actually a treasure trove that I found recently, because I do bring the top 1% of journalists into my program, and they say, I have been looking at a Substack. So a lot of journalists are actually trying to also monetize on their work, and they have their Substacks, and they release what they're writing to their subscribers first, even before it hits the stands. So subscribe to these people's
Interesting.
Substacks, do a search to see who is writing about marketing, about social media, get on their Substack list, subscribe, and then you'll know exactly what they're writing, because they will literally tell you, here is the story I am working on this week. Here is my email. Here's how you to pitch me. So those are all the kind of grassroots way that you can start to get into those journalist inboxes.
Love it. Are there any, because you're a content creator, what are there any platforms that you're excited about kind of moving towards a new year, 2025, that you're excited about that maybe we should, as creators, as leaders in our space, to start paying attention to? I know you mentioned Substack, but are there
Yeah,
any other
Substack is
platforms?
great for journalists, but honestly, like I'm just really invested in my own first party data,
Hmm.
which is like my own platform. So how do we
Yeah.
get people off of other people's platforms and really nurture them in email? So
Okay.
repurposing long form content where it starts with my podcast or my email, and then I bring it out to all of my social media following, because you never know when it's going to get hacked or restricted or banned. I can't depend on that. And so I think PR and like your, email list and a podcast or YouTube is just the longevity game. And that's why you said a lot of people are switching over to YouTube, because again, you want to check the boxes of SEO and searchability and work smarter and not harder. It's like, how do we get more ROI for our time? So YouTube is one of them, right? Podcasting and PR is one of them.
Let's talk about podcasting for a bit, Gloria, because you have, again, I mentioned in the intro, you have a podcast, an awesome podcast I was listening to
Thank you.
yesterday, Small Business PR podcast. By the way, you should go check it out. Subscribe and follow. Let's talk about, because you've been guesting on podcasts, and I'm curious to know your perspective. I've been in the game, so I love hearing from other people that are kind of gotten into this space as well, from different industries. From a PR perspective, like for creators that are interested in maybe using podcasting as a PR tool, whether it's for them to consider to pitch or position themselves,
Mm.
what are your thoughts on that? And I'm curious to know your experience as a podcaster. How have you seen like the power of podcasting brand position yourself as a leader to attract
Yeah.
new media outlets, et
I
cetera?
always say that out of all the buckets of PR that I've done, PR is the most powerful. Why? Because it is the fastest way to get someone's buying interest high, because if someone's willing to listen to you for 30 minutes, that buying intent is much higher than someone liking 20 of my reels. Period. So I've had so many, I can't tell you the number of times I got a DM that's like, hey, I just joined your PR program because I heard you on this person's podcast. And not only is it better in terms of the direct line to making a sale, but it also gives you great SEO and it allows you to repurpose it into 20 different types of content. Reels, podcasts, videograms. So to me, there's no higher leverage activity than podcast guesting.
Love
So
it.
out of all the things, I would say put that on your to-do list. Now, using the CPR method, you can repurpose that pitch for a podcast pitch. And your point of view would just be, here are 5 questions I can answer on your podcast. You see how I did
Ooh,
that?
I like
So
that.
it's still the CPR method. You're still leading with relevance. What are people dealing with?
You're curating the topic, right? You're pitching it to. Okay,
Yeah,
I love that.
exactly. So it works for podcasting too. So highest ROI activity, it gets people buying, it gives you backlinks, it gives you repurposable content. And in terms of being a podcast host, raise your hand if you've gotten those awful pitches where a client is paying somebody else to pitch for them. And
It's the
then
worst, right,
it's the
Gloria?
worst. I
It's
don't know how these people
happening
stay in business.
every
I mean,
day.
my God, the number of times I wanted to respond to the client, but I don't want that person to be out of a job. But it is absolutely awful. It is awful. And I cannot tell you. And this just goes to show that people like journalists, like podcasters, want to hear from you directly, right? Because nothing's more off putting than someone who can't even bother pitching me and having an overseas assistant to pitch me because, like, it's not a good look. So yes, journalists and podcasters absolutely want to hear from you. You can implement a system in your business where you have an intern or assistant pitch, but it's from you. But I cannot tell you the number of times they've pitched me things that don't make sense. Somebody pitched me something with someone who's in construction management.
It's like
Somebody
this
else.
long, an email this long.
Exactly. Here's
Super,
the
super long.
places I've spoken at. It's like, I don't care. Like,
Jeez, yeah.
and I feel, and so it is terrible. And that just goes to my other point, which is this whole thing about pitching for ourselves, advocating for ourselves. That's something we need to do as founders. We need to do that first. Once we get good at it, yes, you can delegate it to someone else. But what you don't want to do is first day on the job, oh, I don't have time for this. I'm going to just throw money at the problem. I'm going to hire someone to pitch for me. Because you are losing out on not only the efficiency of someone saying yes, because I bet that's going to be very low percentage of people wanting to cover you, but you're losing out on all the learning and the skills that you get. Because I think there's no higher skill as founders as knowing how to advocate for ourselves, knowing how to take up space, knowing how to position ourselves. And that is the number one most powerful skill that we have.
Leave it at that. All right, guys, this is it. Thank you so much for listening. That was awesome. That was definitely a soundbite right there because that's so true. And a lot of creatives, and I think that's the reason why I think you're doing a great service for small business owners, but also creatives, for creative types, Gloria, because so often we're very passionate about the thing that we do, and we often forget that it's not about us and it's about them and the value we're going to provide. So we're seeing in these horrible PR podcast pitches, but we're also seeing a lot of creatives say, hey, I could do this and I have so many followers, and we're doing it so wrong. And I think it is a skill set that we can't ignore if we want to monetize our platform, is getting better at, as you said, to piggyback, getting back at just asking and positioning ourselves and just being better at crafting stories that are going to be compelling for others, not just us. And I think that's such a powerful lesson for a lot of creators who are listening and watching to this. So I appreciate that words of advice. I'm curious, moving forward with PR, the flip side is PR has gotten a lot of like bad rap too. I'm sure you heard it, right? A lot of negative connotation. I think mostly, you tell me, has to do with a lot of these PR agencies charging bukus of money. And I was part of projects where PR agencies were brought in to get into the podcasting space, and they didn't know a lick about podcasting, how podcasters and creators work. Curious to know your thoughts. Like, where do you see? Because I know you're an advocate for the small business owners and creators. You're taking a different angle. Again, you're rewriting the rules, and I love that about you. But these agencies, like, where do you see the agencies pivoting and trends that where they could be a little bit more effective in helping more small business owners and creators partner up with brands that they want to be aligned with? What are your
So
thoughts on
here's
that?
the thing: PR agencies are not built for small businesses. They're just not.
Okay,
It's not how they work. It's if you look at the
there it
way they
is.
have force you into retainers and their
Yeah,
contracts, they're for the enterprise brand who can pay 10, 20, 30,
the money.
100,000 on retainer year after year with renewals. So there's nothing wrong with PR agencies. They do incredible work. I have a lot of friends at PR agencies. But for 99% of the small business owners, whether you're solo or not, it's not feasible.
Gotcha.
And they're not going after the small business because they're not willing to have a contract less than $10,000, right? So then basically no one is filling this gap. And traditionally, we're told, well, you have to pay someone or you don't get featured. So PR has have been an afterthought, or it has been something that was scrutinized, or, oh, well, only celebrities and rappers have PR. So there's a lot of that image, which makes sense. And no one up until now has been able to really democratize it and make it accessible, because we've all bought into this idea that we have to pay someone with existing relationship. And so that's why they charge a lot of money. And I found that to be absolutely not true. Yes, you can pay for that, but you can also be your own advocate. And that's sometimes works even better. And so that's why we have a community of thousands of entrepreneurs in every field who's like, more than just PR, I've learned how to advocate for myself. More than PR, I've learned how to talk about myself. And so I think the byproduct of all of this is so much higher than just putting logos here and there, because you can buy logos today. You can buy those fake scammy as seen in, which is, by the way, not editorial, it's advertising, and you're paying double because you could just buy your ad yourself instead of paying that person. You can buy followers, but for me, the process of PR, especially for me as a woman of color, we have a lot of people who are creators of color. It's like, how do we take up space, feel safe in doing that, and how do we feel comfortable talking to ourselves when culturally we've been accustomed to not talk about ourselves. I've been told from a very young age to keep my head down and don't talk about myself. It's bad to promote myself. And so there's a lot of generational stuff that I'm working through with my community in doing this type of work.
Is that what inspires you, Gloria?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was curious to ask you that. I was listening to you, and I was going to ask you. I was like, what inspired you to advocate for small business owners and creators? Because it's such a tall task, especially considering that the PR agency traditionally are all about the big money, and you're speaking directly into the small business owners and creators, independent creators. So, yeah, do you want to expand on that as far as like just your inspiration and the thing that keeps you motivated to continue serving our community?
Been an outsider. I've always been an underdog. And so that is a very important thing for
Love
me.
that.
Like growing up, like my mother, my mother was a widow. She didn't really speak English. So as a child of immigrants, always every room I walked into, when I looked at what success looked like as a kid, no one that looked like me was reflected back at me. And so I think in doing this type of work of teaching people to take up space, we are rewriting representation, right? Because we are literally being featured in the media. So this work is absolutely sacred to me. It's not just about PR. It's not just about SEO or logos. And it's a sacred mission that I found, that when you tap into your why, when you tap into that confidence, right, you're doing more than just growing your business, because other people are going to read that article and be like, wow, this person's story is resonating with me. I need to start pitching. We need to have more diverse stories in the media. It can't just be a third generation Yale grad who got some startup funding from his dad. And that's what we hear a lot of times. And I think the small business landscape, the more research I did, I realized that Black women start small businesses more than any other demographic, but we don't see that reflected in the media. So this work is one of advocacy for me, and it's really important. As you can tell, I got all fired up about it.
Love it. I love it. I love it. I wanted to go there, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. As we land the plane, I always ask our guest this one question, that if there's one creator factor that every creator should learn and master, what would that be?
Making people feel seen.
We'll leave it at that. GloriaChowPR.com is where you can find. Actually, it's GloriaChowPR.com/masterclass. And by the way, Gloria, do you want to talk a little bit about the masterclass? Because I feel like a lot of creators can definitely benefit from that.
Yeah. So if you got value from this, I'm going to show you exactly word for word the CPR pitch, because I think it's powerful to see it in action. And you can see it, my whole training, where I show you word for word a CPR pitch that got someone featured dozens of times at gloriachowpr.com/masterclass. And I'm also on Instagram. I share a lot about my story, about my healing journey with my mom. And so I'm on Instagram at Gloria Chou PR. That's Gloria CHOUPR. And if you DM me the word pitch, I will give you a pitching resource to get you started on your CPR pitch.
Appreciate the generosity. And Gloria, and check out the Small Business PR podcast. Yes, on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you check it out. There's a lot of good information, resources, and creators. we can do a better job of pitching ourselves. And I think being mindful of the way we position ourselves and just getting better at storytelling is going to help our overall creator brand. So I think this is a beautiful, like, I'm glad that you came on the show, because this is what we need more of, Gloria, is leaders like you to share with us creators, small business owners, how we can leverage, mass media, but do it in our own way with our own flair. And then, of course, include voices of diversity. So thank you, my friend. And I also want to give a big shout out to Kenya Kelly, which is a mutual friend of ours, for the introduction. So, Gloria, it's been a little slice of heaven, my friend. And I'm glad, from Houston to New York. Thank you so much for being a part of the Creator Factor show. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me and creating a space for all creators of all walks of life to elevate their stories.
Thank you. I received that.